evening, everyone. This is Miss Vicki for Star Garden Parenting. And as I told my class today, I wanted to speak about Halloween. A couple of years ago, I got, pretty upset about what was going on with young children and Halloween. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. And I'll start with that beautiful verse, May my soul bloom in love for all existence by Rudolf Steiner. And I was telling Angeline, your soul can't help but bloom when you're with young children. Bloom in love, that is. I can't even pay attention when I'm with them. They're so adorable. But anyway, so the thing about Halloween, okay, so we've had the solstice, or the equinox, that is, and the days are getting shorter and it's getting darker. And if you go out at this time of night, which I was out this evening, and you can feel it so strongly, and next week we'll have our lantern walk and you'll feel it again. But Mother Earth really is inhaling, and you feel it just coming in. But what comes in with Mother Earth is also all the beings who have ever been involved with her. So that means all of our ancestors, all the people we know that have died. They haven't really died. They don't have a body. They're not embodied anymore. Steiner called it the supersensible. So they live just on the other side, and they're participating right now. And he spoke quite a lot about death and dying, and gave some amazing insights into it, and how once you cross this threshold, you turn back to serve and to help it evolve. And the more we evolve here, the more they evolve. And so they kind of have a vested interest in it, as well as loving us and loving the place. So you have all these souls that are come close to the earth, and then not only the ancestors, but the saints, those, and initiates would be another word to use for it, the higher evolved beings who come here to guide us and to help us step forward and work our way out of the mess that we have created. So in ancient times, when these festivals were first created, when they first started carving turnips, they didn't carve pumpkins, they carved giant turnips, and just carrying light because it was so dark, they could feel the existence of these other beings around them. And I definitely feel that children can, the things they say to me and the way they look at the world, that they can feel that. So it truly, Halloween was, it means All Hallows Eve. So the eve of all the hallowed ones, the ones that you loved and adored. And so when you start to approach it that way for your own family, just think what that means, your ancestors. And I've spoken about this a little bit, how we have their lineage, we have their DNA, and we're trying to raise it a little bit higher each time we incarnate. And so we are quite close to our ancestors. We're quite close to our grandparents. And I've told people that children are close to their grandparents in a certain way, more close to their grandparents than their parents. The parent is there to kind of help them rub their rough edges and help them carve out their soul and spirit, refine it more. Whereas the grandparent has a different role, and the child looks up to them because they can feel, this is my connection to infinity in a certain way. So that's a lot of what Halloween is about. And then you compare that to what happens in the culture. And I don't go out so much anymore. It's just too beautiful here to leave, mostly. And I also don't care for what I see in a lot of places. And so all of Halloween now is about spook and fear and dread and death and ugliness. And that truly is not what a young child needs. So Steiner spoke about the 7-year phases of children. And he actually received this information from the Greeks. He studied all the ancient civilizations, and it was really the Greeks who came up with this idea of the 7-year phases. They were much more intuitive than modern cultures. So there's 0 to 7, 7 to 14, and 14 to 21. I won't go beyond that, but because after that, you're not parenting them in the same way. But anyway, 0 to 7, what the child needs, what their soul needs, is a model, a belief, an experience of goodness. And if you look at our world and the cartoons and the movies and the advertisements, they don't convey goodness at all. They don't convey the divinity in the human being. And so we basically have this kind of brainwashing that has happened. And I remember it as a child. I remember when TV came out. So, I was alive when it first really started. And the things they did just seemed so odd to me, really very odd. And really, the media has downgraded civilization. They've made it so that families don't get along. They're always fighting. The children are in trouble. They're that kind of thing. And a lot of sexuality and disrespect and so on and so forth. And none of that benefits any child, but especially a young child. Because if you look at the soul of a young child, they are so tender. They're so tender that they don't want you to look into their eyes, because the eyes are the window of the soul. And when you look into their eyes, you can see into their depths and you can know who they are. So they will often look away, except with their parents or some very trusted being. And many modern people think that that's really odd and what's wrong with the child when they won't look in your eye, when in fact it's a good thing that they don't, because they're so completely open and vulnerable, and they have no way of discerning what is happening and what it means, and is it real or is it not real, or any of that. So there's a young boy in the class whose mama told me about him going to the elementary school St. Michael pageant. And it's a beautiful pageant, but it's a little much for young children. So they have this big, gorgeous dragon, and the dragon had these big eyes that scared him, and then it breathes out smoke. And it really scared him. For days, he kept talking about it. And so over a couple of weeks, she and I processed it, and I remembered then about how you can tell stories for the children that help them to overcome these things in their inner life. And so basically, I just suggested a story where and I used to do this story, especially in the younger grades, but where the dragon, St. Michael, takes his sword of light and he subdues the dragon. He does not slay the dragon. That was not the real story, that he slayed it. It was that he subdued it and he helped the dragon turn to light. And so then the dragon serves humanity by, starting campfires and things like that where you need heat. And so she told him that story, and it really did soothe him. But my point is that you have to be very careful with children what they're exposed to, because they really can damage them for a long time, especially if someone isn't helping them through these experiences that they go through that are disturbing to them. So goodness. And our culture, the movies, et cetera, encourages children to be the evil one, the devil, I don't even remember the names of all of them because I've not been in touch with them for so long, but Darth Vader and so on, that are really dark characters. And yes, we all have our lower being, our animalistic side, our unevolved part. And we have to come to terms with that. But no child can come to terms with that at all. They don't express evil. When they do something wrong, it's wrong is the wrong word. It's not even a mistake. They don't understand time and space. So they do things in the wrong time or the wrong space. And so, as I've said before, you help them to find the right time or the right space. They want to throw balls. Okay, we'll wait till we go outside. Or we use little felt balls in a basket inside, that sort of thing, where you redirect them. And in the process, help them know that if you throw that here, you'll break the window, or, that kind of thing, that they start to understand that there's limits, there's boundaries, which is what we were speaking about in the last couple of weeks. And I wouldn't mind continuing that a little bit as well, because the boundary helps you gain your sense of higher ego. I'm here in my strength and my power and my truth and my goodness, and the world can't harm me. That's what boundary does for a child. So, yeah, they need to have these pictures of goodness, or the things that redeem themselves. And so a couple of years ago, I used to do, the typical little Waldorf Halloween things about the witch and this and that. And it really came to me that children need to see more truth, goodness, and beauty. And so I switched around my puppet show, and we're going to try to film it tomorrow so you can see it with the children help put it on, which is a delight. So anyway, there comes a point where the witch shows up at the door, and Michael booms out, "No, no, no, the witch must go. The earth needs goodness to stay." And really, evolutionary wise, that is what our earth is calling for. We can change politicians, we can change governments, we can change rules, we can change laws. None of it will have any positive effect unless human beings become good, true, pure, honest, so on and so forth. And so, there's a part of us that has to come to terms with that, each one of us in our own daily lives. And so with the children, when they identify with the negative images, it can be helpful to help tell them stories to elevate it to the one who has redeemed itself. And then the other thing that I wanted to share about all these evil images, and there are some very evil images out there that children just should not see, and it's very hard. I remember a period of time where I didn't take the boys to the store because you couldn't walk through the aisle without seeing ugly, 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 mean, 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 cruel, cruel, cruel. And so the children, and all of us really, when you gaze at something, when your eyes look at something, the form of that thing, right now I'm looking at a beautiful picture. That picture embodies a being. That picture embodies qualities. That picture embodies a lot that you can't put into words, but it goes through your eyes, into your nervous system, into your brain, into every cell, every atom, every organ, and helps to form it. It affects your breathing. It affects your blood pressure, so on and so forth. And so this is where, I've done the talks on the 12 senses, where what comes into the children through their senses forms their body. And if you want them and would like to help them be as healthy as they can be, you want those to be good, true, and beautiful images that they're looking at. And yeah, and it has a much more profound effect than you think. Steiner said something like that by the time we reach early adulthood, which is 21, you're not truly an adult until between 28 and 33. But when you reach that point, your being is about 85, 90+% the people around you, your parents, your grandparents, your aunties, uncles, the friends, the school, all of that has formed and shaped you. And at that point, you take on getting to know yourself and becoming the person you truly are. And maybe you agree with everything you were ever taught and everything in your environment, or maybe you don't, but you have that free will to transform that. So, my point is that every day we see thousands upon thousands of images that helps to form our realities. And it just behooves us, even as adults, to take care at what we look at. And for the young child, even more so, because they're just a little sponge. They cannot filter out any of it. It goes in very deeply. It starts to harden their organs, harden their brain, and you can, the hardening illnesses are Alzheimer's, cancer, Parkinson's, etc. Those kinds of diseases, even heart attacks, are hardening illnesses. And this is what Steiner said, that if we continue to educate our children in the way that they've been educated, that people would become so diseased that in their fifth they wouldn't make it much beyond their 50s. And that's when all the onset of disease in a big way starts in the 50s. So it means a lot for your child, and it means a lot, you know. And my worldview, what I've always believed in parenting is that, or as I've said before, that yes, we're here to feed, clothe, care for the physical being of the child, but we're also here to help them evolve, to help their soul find happiness, find joy, contentment, seeking knowledge, wisdom, and those higher attributes, because sooner or later we will leave these bodies behind and enter a world where those attributes count. The rest falls away because it's temporal, and we'll enter our life of eternity where the qualities we build up in our soul and our spirit are what matters. So, yeah. And then I was going to go on just a little bit about what the other 7-year phases need. So 7 to 14, and this comes from Steiner via the Greeks. And if you think about it and you feel it, and if you experience Waldorf education as a teacher, it's amazing. 7 to 14 is about beauty. And so the children are learning everything artistically. And that means in every great sense. You might just think of painting, drawing, but it's also recitation and modeling and carving and sewing and so on and so forth, all the many, many different expressions that one can have. And so the children learn how to create beauty, which helps their souls so much to experience beauty. And beauty is a sacred quality. It isn't self-centered to wish for beauty. Beauty is personified by Venus, and a connection to Venus gives you that love of beauty, which typically women love, and men who have the Venus influence as well. Not to say that other men don't love beauty, they do. But yeah, beauty is a very important quality. And in that expression of the arts and beauty that children experience from 7 to 14, they have these deep experiences of color, for instance. And colors are very special qualities. If you look at blue, it does something to your soul. It helps to give you a boundary. It helps you to feel strong and centered and focused. If you look at yellow, it diffuses you in a very happy, joyous way, and so on and so forth. So the experiences that children have of color, or the experiences as they get older of perspective and black and white drawing and so on, all of these things have to do with what's developing in their soul. So that's 7 to 14. And then, and of course, it's not on the day of 14, but roundabout is the birth of the astral body. And the astral body is the star energy, star. And it has to do with the light of thinking. And it's the point when the child, the young, getting on to be a young adult, starts to be able to develop discernment. And it's what would you call it? A very young quality of discernment. Um, and as I said about a young young 14 to 21-year-old, they're always trying to convince you what they want more than true discernment. And at that age, you're what they need to experience on a very deep level in their soul is truth. And well, I've been singing that song, for the seed of love within us, for the beauty all around us, for the strength of truth before us. Praises sing to God. So truth is a very important thing, and that's what you work with when the children get to that age. So you need to be explaining to them. And I'm talking about your young children or 7 to 14, but around about getting up to 14 years old. You're explaining to them why you think they can't go driving around with their friends at midnight, what your line of reasoning is, how you came to make the decision you do, and the truth of it, and all of that. And so, yeah, truth is a very important thing. And I remember at 21, probably like more around 19, as I started to enter the world, that I was so disappointed that I could not find wisdom and truth. I couldn't find people who represented any deeper spiritual expression of life. And I think, many of us are looking for that. And especially the children that I see a lot, I call them, well, you can call them crystal children, you can call them the next root race. They come in with abilities and capacities, spiritual and soul capacities that we didn't have as children. And because we've evolved a little bit, we're allowing them to stay that way rather than telling them, here's how you should think and here's what you should know. And I had I'm doing parent conferences now, and one of the fathers asked a lovely question. He said, my daughter asks questions, and he's been educated in Waldorf, so he's in the know a little bit about stages of life and so on. And my daughter asks me, and I want to give her the intellectual ideas and thoughts about it. What do you think about that? And she's 5 years old. And I said, well, here's what Steiner said about it and what I believe to be true, that when you start to work with children too young in their thought world, you're basically taking energy, their life force, from their other organs. And 0 to 7, all those organs are still in formation. They don't function at all like an adult. They don't breathe at the same rate. Their pulse isn't the same rate, and so on and so forth. They're still in formation. And they need a lot of life force for their body to be healthy. It doesn't just happen. And the brain does the more development than it will ever do, 0 to 7. And it takes more energy than most of the rest of the body. And so when you pull them up into thinking, especially abstract black and white type thinking, it really kind of hardens their life force rather than being filled with vitality and life and color and rosiness and excitement and so on. And so that's one aspect of using thinking that way. But it isn't that a child shouldn't think. It's what Steiner called imaginative thinking. And that's what stories are. And you can paint amazing truths in stories and metaphors and mythology and fairy tales and so on. And, expressions of the natural world with the gnomes and fairies. All of that is imaginative thinking. It's not that it's not thinking, it means that it is thinking that also engages your inner process of vision so that you create the world out of your inner vision. That's what we are meant to do as co-creator beings, to have an inward vision of it and then to manifest it outwardly. And so then the other thing that I said that makes it really not helpful to young children, to tell them the scientific facts and this is how it is and so on and so forth, is if you follow science at all, which I'm very fortunate that I have kids who do a lot of research about these things, and I myself do. When I moved to Boulder, I started studying physics, and I'm always studying biology and so on and so forth, and health. And science is exploding. They said that the internet would give us knowledge, would multiply by tremendous amounts through the internet. And while there's the downside in having to be able to read through it and is it true and so on, it is, there is an explosion of understanding of the way the universe is. So if you're telling a child, like when I was in school, I was told the facts of the 10 years before, because education is always at least 10, if not 25 years behind the most modern research. And evidence of that is that they use computers in classes with young children when brain research shows it's damaging. It doesn't help the brain when it's still in a plastic state and needs to be that way. So you're teaching them facts, but they're old dead facts. They don't serve us anymore. And the things that are learning about the universe, down to the little atoms and different elements and the different levels of energy and so on and so forth, are amazing. So you really kind of stilt a child if you teach them what you were taught and what you've learned. And that time will come. And more, what we try to do in Waldorf education is give them a great love of learning so that they will pursue the truth for themselves, so that they will pursue their interests about science and the world and etc., that they can learn themselves and help us to evolve even more. So that was what I wanted to talk about tonight. So that was kind of an abrupt ending. And let me see. Yeah, I'm going to give you just a little idea of what I do with the children in the class for Halloween. Very simple, very easy. We'll have popcorn with a little maple syrup on it, really special. And then we do the puppet show, and I let them help me enact it together. And then in preparation for this little game that I have been doing with them and singing different songs and verses related to Halloween, I'm going to face paint them. And then we play this little game after we've done all the songs and verses we've been doing, and they know them all so well now. I can, when it's time for us to sing, I say, okay, you lead. I'll say one of them to lead, and they just all know it. They could practically do it without me. So anyway, the little game is ha ha ha, he, I'm a little owl in a tree. Ha ha ha, he, I think you can find me. So the game is that they get under this little tent, and I first hide the owl, but the owl has to be hidden in plain sight and not under in and so on. And then they come out from the tent and they look around, and then I choose one of them to find it, and it goes on that way. And it's just simple, but you cannot believe how thrilled they are to do it. So all day long we're singing ha ha ha, he, I'm a little owl in the tree. And tomorrow I was hoping to teach them the little verse. Let's see. The wise old owl was a friendly bird. The more he spoke, the less he heard. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Why can't we all be like that wise old bird? So with that, I'll hush up now and see if anyone has asked any questions. All right. Are there any questions? I think I see one coming along. Get a little drink. And the truth of the matter with all festivals, the more simple, the better. They don't need complexity. They don't need a lot of material things. Material things just get confusing. Well, one way, and at Shining Mountain, the question is, how do we incorporate the festival aspect into holidays like Halloween rather than following the commercial way of celebrating it? At Shining Mountain, they celebrate All Souls and All Saints Day. And that means that people come and they have a kind of remembrance of ancestors. So you could do this at home, where you can put the grandmother's picture there and grandpa's picture or whoever, and light little candles and share little remembrances of them. And then, just simple. I mean, food is all about holidays. What do you make for Halloween's apple cider? Popcorn balls, apples dipped in caramel, whatever you can come up with. There's amazing vegan recipes now for you to follow. And then the simplest of costumes, and I learned that one the hard way. My first child, Lori, wanted to go. We lived 45 miles from town, and she wanted to go trick-or-treating, and she wanted a costume. So we decided, because we had been reading Raggedy Ann, that she should have a Raggedy Ann costume. So I made her this dress, and I made this long involved wig that looked like Raggedy Ann. And we drove 45 miles down to town, and she didn't get candy much back then. And we walked to the first house, and they gave her a candy bar, and she said, "Let's go home, Mom." I said, "Oh no, you're going to two houses." Anyway, and then after that, what I discovered with the kids is they always had some big idea they were going to be thus and such. And then the night of Halloween, it always changed to they were going to be something else. So we just had the costume basket really for the most part, and face painting, and they don't even know what they look like really. So it's the process more than the outcome. So that's just a couple of, and all the songs and verses. At this time of year, scary characters are everywhere. What can we tell our children about these images when they do see them? Yeah, it's just tough. Like I said, I didn't take my boys to Kmart or any of those stores because it was like, and between that and the TV and the magazine aisle, where you're like, oh my gosh. Even still, I'm like, we don't need to be looking at those images. They're not helpful to our evolution, and it's deliberate that that's being done to us to try to bring us down so we can't evolve out of this darkness. So we evolve out of this kind of oppression that's happening. So I don't know. I think stories like the one of the dragon where you redeem it, and oh yeah, there's the naughty little devil there, and the angel goes in and helps him to help himself because he's not very happy like that, and that sort of thing, where you always give them pictures and stories of redemption, because that really is what we all will have if we choose to have it. We will all be given mercy for the multitude of mistakes we've made in multitudes of lives. So, would it be better to have our own Halloween party than taking them trick or treating? I, based on the way things look, unless you just have the sweetest little neighborhood, I think so. And my daughter was young when, I don't know, somebody put a razor blade in something or other. So that's how the Halloween journeys came about in the Waldorf schools. But yeah, little parties where they do the bobbing for apples and, pinning the tail on the donkey, whatever, just simple things. We think of those as backwards, but children love that sort of thing. And the fact that at Halloween you can do it in the dark, you could be outside around a fire, and yeah, I do think doing your own thing is better, and go to the stores where they don't have those horrific magazines based on all the melodrama of all the stars, like that isn't elevating the soul. Yeah, and also I didn't like to take them trick or treating because of just the sugar. It's coming out more and more how damaging sugar is in excess. Obviously, a little bit doesn't hurt you, but many of the candies that are given because they're sold cheaply and they're made cheaply because they're made out of artificial things, which are cheap to manufacture, our kids don't need that. And so we all, back then we all, and people still do it, the switch witch and that sort of thing where you switch everything out for them. Because I remember trick or treating, it was fun. And back then our costumes were like the ghost in the sheet, the sheet with two eyes cut out, and that sort of thing. They were the most simple costumes. And when the people opened the door, they were so excited to see us and so on. So I know trick or treating does feel really good. How can we show goodness in all things when there are dangerous people out there? Isn't that setting them up for blind trust? How can we temper that with discernment when they are very young? Well, first of all, I don't really think, I think that children need to be in the presence of a trusted adult at all times. Now, I know, and all times is a bit of an exaggeration. I can let my kids, not the class, but my own children would wander around our pasture. But would I let them go to town and wander around? No, not so much. Although I do have a deep belief in angels for them. And yeah, for the most part, I think that we, as their parent and their aunties and their uncles and their grandparents, are the ones who really need to look out for them when they're young and let them revel in innocence. They will come to the hard truth of the things that are around them. Um, and there's this thinking that you're not exposed to it when you're young, you'll never learn it. Well, that's just false thinking. The people who created the computer knew nothing about it when they were born. They didn't even start until they were, 12, 17, 18. You don't have to be exposed to something. If it weakens you when you're young, how does that help you as you get older? I don't really think it does, but I do know, like I said, when Lori was young, my daughter, somebody put razor blades in treats. Terrible. Um, so no, you can't just blindly trust the world. It's very true. But on the other hand, you can blindly trust your higher being to and do meditative practices of creating armor. I'm doing this one in my Sunday class with children. It's the armor of light. And light is an actual substance. Light is something that you build in yourself. You, by what you think and what you feel, you help the light around the cells of your body to move faster and create more light. And then you create an auric field of light. And those are protective. And there are other meditations you can do to protect yourself. And definitely a lot of verses and songs that we do with children in Waldorf do that for them. And the whole image of Michael is a protector. And he is a protector. But in large part, he protects you by helping you develop discerning thinking. So, yeah, you know, it's very hard to be discerning when you're young. You don't really have enough life experience. And there are children who can read people, and you'll watch them and they are suspect of people. They don't want to go anywhere near them. I did that when I was a child. I would hide behind my mother when I would see certain people. It was like, no, that is a scary person. There's no way I'm going near them. So children do have a sense of those things, but how are they going to protect themselves? They're gonna, they could run. Yeah. And I just think, and for the most part, they need to be with people that are trusted. And that's what I think, when parents choose a teacher, they should choose one that they ultimately trust them like a family member. You don't really know what happens with that teacher during the time when your child is with them. You have to have a basis of soul trust and love and respect. So there's that. We as adults are able to filter out scary or inappropriate things, sort of. I mean, those images have a direct effect on you that you don't know. I don't know if you've noticed when you go out, and I've said this, like when I go to Costco, for instance, I'm fine with Costco. I know what I need there, blah, blah, blah. But somewhere down the aisle, I get down there and I start worrying about money. I'm not really a money worrier, but I think I'm just picking up thoughts. We pick up thoughts around us and all kinds of discord around us. That's why when you come home, you're tired and you feel like you have this kind of crusty layer on you, because the world is filled with a lot of discord. People really need to cultivate their life with their spiritual self to cleanse themselves and come to a better place with themselves. So we often forget how vulnerable, open, and pure children are when they are exposed to things we don't realize are damaging. Those inappropriate things seem to be everywhere. Does good role modeling help to set off the bad? Yeah, I think so. I think so. And, I've seen children, especially as they get closer to school age, it's like they're weighing and measuring a little bit. They're looking at people and they're thinking, would I want to be like that? Does that person look happy? Does that? So they do start to get, some sense of things that way. Um, yeah. And really, to tell stories, have a spiritual life with your child where you talk about things, not so much when they're really young, but, talk to them about so and so's having a hard time and we can all love them and support them and so on and so forth, like that, that they start to understand. And that's really what I did in sibling relationships. I would try to help my children understand their siblings' perspective, and he doesn't really do things the way you do. He doesn't see things the way you do. And, to help them try to live into the moccasins of another person. Our culture, yeah, but good role modeling is definitely very, very valuable. Children learn more by imitation than anything. We don't really realize it, but they do. They just kind of suck it in and make it their own. And that was, one of the principal teachings that Steiner gave for a kindergarten teacher. You are the role model. Everything that happens in your class, you're responsible for. And it's kind of an empowering thing, even as a parent, because you can think on, well, how could I change that? How would I change the meal time? How would I change bedtime to make it a more soul enlivening, soul heartening time? Or, feed them early, or whatever ways that you can help them. As I wanted to say to one of my children who posted a beautiful picture, and I told him that it was just like his beautiful soul. And he said, well, I got it from you, Mama. And what I want to say to him is, no, you actually got it through your relationship to your higher self. And all I did was to provide a very positive, creative environment for you to thrive in that relationship with your higher self. And that's really what it is. And I follow that poem of, it's not Rumi. His name isn't coming to me right now. I'll pull it out at one of these points. I just love it. And he says, we don't own our children. They're not us. They're not a reflection of us. They are their own little beings. And when you start to approach them that way, you have such a deep respect for them that they automatically become more respectful because they feel respected. So, our culture today is not in touch with what is good for the soul, for the child, and for even adults. How do we get more in touch with what we need for our soul and our children's soul? Well, I always think a lot of time in nature. Nature is just so soul enriching. Plants, this is why I've always loved plants, even as a very young child. I could feel all plants do is love you. They just radiate love to you. And that, and, developing, finding little books, having little talks with your children. Um, maybe find a church. Like the children come once a month to my class, a few of them, and I'm talking to them about universal principles and how they can create light in themselves and protect themselves with that light, and how their love goes out into the world to help the world. The world needs that, and they I think they're actually attracted to it, that because people feel that kind of need. They just don't know where to find it because they have had more or less deprived childhoods. Um, yeah, and singing and doing arts with your children too, even the very simplest things, can be really helpful to the soul. The soul revels in music. The music we hear, the music we sing is a kind of a reflection, a filtering down of the music of the spheres. And the music of the spheres goes all the time in our outer atmosphere and works to create harmony and to dissolve the disharmony that we've created. And that's it for the questions. Thank you. All right. So, am I on time? Oh, pretty close. I didn't go too much over. So, love to hear your feedback and definitely want to hear your questions. And these little thoughts come to me just based on what's being talked about in class and concerns and so on. So, yeah, thank you very much. And may my soul bloom in love for all existence by Rudolf Steiner. Thank you.